Welcome to the ZimmCast, a program dedicated to bringing you what's new in agricultural marketing. The ZimmCast is the official podcast of AgWired and hosted by Chuck and Cindy Zimmerman.
Hello and welcome to the ZimmCast. I'm Chuck Zimmerman. The last 2 weeks have been pretty hectic for the ZimmComm team. I was in Orlando for CattleCon, and I'm going to share some interviews from there in this episode. And then I was off to Fort Worth for the Clean Fuels Conference, while Cindy went to Scottsdale for the Crop Insurance and Reinsurance Bureau annual meeting. You can find virtual newsrooms for all of them on agnewswire.com. They contain links to the photo albums, interviews, and selected session audio. Now we've got a break this week, but a lot more on the schedule in the next couple months. So let's get on with CattleCon. I'm going to share interviews with Todd Wilkinson, now past NCBA President, Mark Eisele, who is the NCBA President now, Buck Wehrbein, NCBA President-elect, and Colin Woodall, who is the CEO of NCBA.
I have with me Todd Wilkinson, and Todd, you are the NCBA President here, and I think things are off to a great start. What's your
the numbers are way up. The attitude is awesome. I'll tell you, when you can let the cow-calf guys make a little bit of money, it always makes them a little happier when they come to an event like this. And the fact that our industry is looking pretty positive for a number of years, it's a good time to be president.
Well, I love the name change, I guess you could say, and it just fits so well with it. So I think that's whoever did that, I give them kudos, and I don't know anybody that doesn't feel that way. So we're glad to be here at CattleCon, and I know you're going to be speaking, I think, at a general session or whatever, but how about if you maybe just give us a little bit of an overview of NCBA, things that you want to let people know you've been doing or you're maybe looking ahead for as we are, we're well into the year already.
Yeah, I'm a policy guy, so I'm always looking forward to what do we need to do for the industry? What can I do for that producer as they work in their operation? I'm a less is more type thing a guy. I know from my operation years ago, I wasn't involved in any organized cattle industry, and we were running our operation, and then somebody come in and tried to tell me what to do. I think it was a zoning issue, and that fired me up. And I thought, I better get in. I better try and participate on an organization that can make a difference, rather than just sitting at the coffee shop or at the livestock auction and complaining. So that's kind of the genesis of why I sit here with you today, is because I see NCBA as an entity that can make a difference and has made a difference. And going forward, one of the big issues that I'm talking to lots of folks about, because I don't know that it's on their radar, is the federal estate and gift tax change that's coming up at the end of 2025. And the way I try to explain that for people is to say, think of your income tax. One year you do your income tax, and the next year you do it, and half of your deductions are gone, and you didn't get to say anything about it. Well, that's really what's going to happen in the landscape. Because of the way the law was passed a number of years ago, we're going to lose half of our federal estate and gift tax deduction. And for farmers and ranchers, we don't have a lot of money in the bank accounts, but we have a fair amount of assets on the balance sheet. Whether that's land, whether that's cattle, whether that's equipment, and all of that is necessary in order to make your operational economically feasible. So suddenly when all of a sudden the government says, I'm going to tax you at 40% of anything you own over and above a certain level when somebody dies, that's just not the way it should be. You've paid your taxes to acquire the assets. We don't need a redistribution of wealth, which is basically what a death tax is. You're going to take that money, and then you're going to give it to somebody that's out there doing nothing. And I'm a capitalist. I believe that we all can go out and do our our best to make our operations successful for the future. But don't come in and tax me out of existence and then take it and then use it for wasteful things.
It's kind of like human nature to a degree. Well, that's not until the end of next year, so do we have to deal with that now? The fact is, it's not only not too early to do it, but it's only going to get more difficult the closer we get, unless we can get something done, right?
Well, and it really is. I mean, let's face reality. We're in an election year. Getting much of anything accomplished by Congress and having the administration sign off on it is probably not very optimistic. So what does that mean? We've probably blown most of 24. Then we're into 25, and we have a new administration. And depending on how that goes, Congress is going to be twiddling its thumbs trying to get something done. So the urgency is kind of there now. We can't let this major tax burden get lowered on the rural economies. We need to be on this right now.
Well, there certainly are a long list of issues that NCBA is dealing with, has been, some of them for many years, really, but in things that kind of just keep popping back up, things like Waters of the U.S., for example. But what are some of the other key issues that you feel cattlemen need to be represented for and helped, and some of the issues that they're having? And there are a number of them. Yeah,
and of course I got to start, because we're in Farm Bill reauthorization. I got to start with the Farm Bill. Am I optimistic we're going to get a Farm Bill done in 24? Yeah, probably more so than I was in 23, simply because Senator Stabenow is retiring at the end of 2024, and she's the ranking member on the ag side in the Senate, and I don't think she wants to have part of her legacy that she couldn't get a Farm Bill passed. So I think that gives us some optimism. But what does that mean? We got to go in there and slug away and work the halls to try and get the provisions that are good for the cattle producer. And one of them is a vaccine bank, the disease vaccine bank that is so important for foot and mouth protection. Another one is the livestock risk insurance product that has been immensely successful. There's an example of where legislation was passed and the government allowed it, and it worked. I equate it to what the corn and the bean operators have had for so many years with their crop insurance. It gives us a level of risk protection that we haven't enjoyed. And getting that reauthorized and getting that properly funded is really critical in this Farm Bill. And some other issues beyond the Farm Bill. One of them is part of the disease protection, and I think that comes from the producers out there volunteering to put that EID tag in their ear. Now, you notice I said the word voluntary. I didn't say the word mandatory. And as much as the social media heads out there in the internet are saying that NCBA has a particular policy, that's not what our policy is. And our policy is voluntary. And that needs to happen.
How about one that just keeps getting worse, it seems like, and that's this whole southern border issue with the immigration, the people that are coming in here. Besides having damage to, say, their ranch, and when they're running through it, stealing things, it gets worse, and it seems like it's just going to keep getting more worse until something happes.
Yeah, and for a number of producers that are on the front line with that isn't just a loss of of equipment or things. It's a life and death issue. I mean, this is whether you're safe at home, whether you're for my producers, whether your cattle are safe. But you know that you can have that conversation in the southern border states, but it's just as much a reality in the north. I mean, the impact of unregulated illegal immigrants coming through it is bankrupting much of the country in terms of being able to deal with this. So all of the issues that we expect from the government, like building a road or maintaining a defense or providing good health care, all of those things are being strained because we can't keep control of our southern border. And the one that really comes to mind for me is animal disease, because all you have to do is look at the poultry folks and what they're going through, and then pork is sitting there with a major disease off the coast at the Dominican Republic. Beef is not immune to this. If COVID taught us anything, is that we are going to be impacted by this. And unfortunately, I think it's coming from the southern border because there's nothing to keep it out.
How about as far as membership, the kind of work that NCBA is doing? It just seems like you guys have a great team put together, and they're really doing some great work on behalf of their members. Yeah,
and there's two facets to our team. We have the team that's out there trying to advance research and deal with the checkoff side and advancing that eating experience for the public. We all enjoy a good steak nowadays. If you're my age, you can also remember what your steak was like back in the 60s and the 70s, and to equate it to shoe leather would not be a stretch. So a lot of that has come from the work of the checkoff and beef advancements. And then also things like how we treat our cattle, how do we handle our cattle. I mean, all of that comes through that program. But then you flip it over to the policy side, and we have a whole team in Washington, D.C. that is dedicated to doing nothing more than putting in place every policy that this organization adopts. And that's their marching orders. It isn't what somebody wants from corporate America. I find it humorous that somebody equates the NCBA to a corporate organization when it's made up of individual producers, and when our policy is made up of individual producers. I guess I should take it as somewhat of a compliment, the fact that they attempt to criticize our organization, because clearly they can't get anything done, and we can, and they haven't got enough guts to come and play in our sandbox. They don't want to do it the right way and become a member. So I'm proud of what we accomplish. I'm proud of what we actually deliver for every cow-calf operator, every feedlot operator across the country. We don't just talk a good game. We go out and play one.
Before we close on this interview, any other issues or topics that you might want to bring out for whether it's the attendees that are here or ones that cannot be here?
Yeah, I just want to stress that where we are at anymore when we deal with issues, it seems like outside forces, and when I'm talking about people not in the industry. So the animal rights activists right now have an operating budget between all the alphabet soup ones, the ASPCA, HSUS, all those puppy dog commercials. They're not putting that money back into your local humane society. What they're doing is using that to advocate against farmers and ranchers. And most of the folks in my area, at least, are not aware of that. They aren't aware that somebody's in there trying to shape the farm bill to the negative. And then I was just in Europe, and I witnessed firsthand how the European governments are largely getting dictated to by organizations outside of ag. And they're being, those farmers and ranchers are being told they're going to reduce their herd size, they're not going to be able to plant certain crops. If we aren't diligent on what we do, if we do not protect ourselves, people that want to put us out of business will succeed. And that's the biggest thing I would tell the producer, the listener out there. There are people that think they know how to run your operation, and they don't have a clue. They're not going to bring that calf in the middle of the snowstorm. They're not going to do whatever they need to do to protect the animal. So we're here, we're going to do that, and we're going to deliver the message.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Todd, for your time here. You've got a great conference going on here from CattleCon 2024. I'm Chuck Zimmerman reporting. I'm visiting with Mark Eisele. And Mark, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation.
Sure. My family and I are cow-calf and yearling producers in the southeast corner of Wyoming. Ranch is at about 6,400-foot elevation. We're both private and public lands ranch.
So you are our president-elect.
Correct.
And that means that while we are here in Orlando, Florida, we're going to have a change in the gavel. So what are your thoughts as you get pretty close to that here, just a couple days?
It's exciting and very humbling. There is a burden there. I have a responsibility to our producers to do the best work, but what an honor.
Well, I'll congratulate you early as we get to that point. But right now, let's just talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on out here in the world that affect cattle producers, and in case the one we want to kind of start with here, all kinds of different businesses, really, but this would be what we call the death tax, and the fact that we've got until the end of next year to do something about that.
You know, it's a crying shame we have to keep revisiting this, because what's happened in the electorate is very few farmers and ranchers in it anymore. They can kind of do what they want to do, and it doesn't seem to matter because there's not enough of us in rural America to outvote that. But we're so critical. Everybody wants to be well-fed. Well, that's what it takes to be well-fed. You've got to keep these ranches and farms in transition. You have to be able to go to the next generation. You have to keep them viable. The death tax, I wonder how many ranches and farms have paid for themselves over and over and over again through no fault of their own, other than the government wanting tax money.
And that just keeps getting worse and worse and putting more and more pressure on our elected officials in D.C. in particular to do something about it. And we're an easy target, like you said. So what is it that people can do, or should they be doing, kind of even at this point, knowing that some people think, oh, well, that's next year, you know?
The folks who are running operations need to be proactive right now. You need to be talking to your tax professionals, your CPA, your banker. You need to make plans. You need to be proactive in a transition. Look for options that you can possibly use. You have to do that first and work that plan once you get it in place. I think the folks that don't belong or are in agriculture, I don't think they understand. We have a low return on our assets, low return on our investment, and so even though we might be land rich or equipment rich, we're probably cash poor. And the only viable alternative for some folks is to sell their farm or ranch to pay that tax through no fault of their own.
And a lot of people don't understand that a lot of these are family-owned businesses, and what happens when the farmer passes away and he's got children, and so that's a plan anybody should be thinking of, but boy, it can really hurt.
Well, example happened to us. My predecessor passed away 7 days into the new year when in 2010-11, when that tax rate went from 0% to 55%. We had to come up with 55% of the value of the ranch to keep it, just to keep it. Fortunately, we had been working on an estate plan for 10 years, and we had a backup plan. We were able to pull that tax bill down. It was reasonable. We didn't have to sell anything, and it was a lifesaver that we done it. I encourage people to do this. You have to figure out a plan to make that work. And local economies should be grateful for that's happening. Businesses also, because that's what supports those local economies. We buy feed, we buy groceries, equipment, pickup trucks, repairs from the local economy. That's the tax base. It all matters.
Well, again, as you are now going into your year here coming up, that's obviously a very important one to deal with. What are some of the other ones that are of special focus to you at this point?
We've got to wrap up this farm bill. We've got to get some certainty in the farm bill. Animal agriculture in particular, not to take anything away from anybody else, but we've got to get a handle on the disease traceability, the disease control like the National Animal Vaccine and Countermeasures Bank. We've got to have vaccine fully stocked. We have to have control of our borders and have a say in what's allowed into this country, like the imports from Paraguay and Brazil where they have potential foot and mouth. We need to make our markets open so we can export our product and get the best possible prices for it. I think the checkoff needs to be protected. I think consumers need to be aware of cell-cultured meat and what honesty in labeling means to them. So those are just some of the things, but the Farm Bill is absolutely right at the top. There's also price protection and disaster relief in those that are built in, critical to our producers.
We're in an interesting time in terms of if you're a cattle producer, you're having some good prices, for example, but at the same time, it's still very volatile, and we do have a smaller herd out there, but those things have kind of go up and down and over time. So what's sort of your outlook on that and how that might change about?
We're having a bigger dip now than we have. I mean, we've got this jump in prices, which is great. Our inputs have gotten more expensive, and I think inflation is the real danger, that and the cost of borrowed money for an operation. Those are huge problems, huge hurdles for us to overcome. I see some glimmers of hope because the high prices allow some people to buy livestock and maybe expand their operation, rent some more ground, maybe bring back another family member, or do a sell-lease with their livestock and bring another person in, maybe retire or change your lifestyle for the betterment. But certainly not sell the ranch. If there's a legacy involved or love of the land and it's a great way to raise a family, you need to find a way to protect that.
Well, before we close here, we are still kind of in the early stages of what we now call CattleCon. What's your thoughts on what you've seen so far in this kind of a different agenda we've got? It's
a great convention, great gathering, great venue, great format in front of us, education, trade show, policy meetings, checkoff meetings. It's just fantastic. The Cattlemen's College is exceptional. We're having a great turnout. We may actually exceed our expectations, and that's a great thing. So if you've never been to one, you should come. If you're here, thank you for coming. I'm trying to think, do you know where we're going to be next year? I believe we're going to be in San Antonio. That's right. I saw the sign out there. So San Antonio in 2025. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for visiting with me here at CattleCon 2024. I'm Chuck Zimmerman reporting. I am visiting with Buck Wehrbein. And Buck, you are the NCBA Vice President right now, and I'd love to kind of get some thoughts from you about some of the issues that you're dealing with, and one of them is this cell product to, I guess, try to create a version of meat. I don't even know how you describe this, but tell me a little bit about that and what NCBA is doing over that.
Sure. We've competed with plant-based protein for 30-some years, I suppose, and we don't mind competing, and that's fine. The cell-cultured protein is a concern because there's a difference between it and plant-based protein, and what we really are concerned about when you simmer it down is that the consumer understands exactly what they are getting. So a focus for us is not trying to stop it or anything like that, but rather to make sure that the labeling is proper, that the proper government agency has control of that and influence over it. And so when it comes time to actually compete with them, if they ever become profitable and economically viable, that people understand what they're getting. We don't mind competing.
So do you have a sense for how far along they are, or is this really something that's kind of pretty far out in the future still?
Well, I don't. That's so far out of my area of expertise. But there are major companies that are purchasing plants and investing in companies that are doing this. There's chicken, I don't know what you call them, chicken nuggets that are being produced now and can be sold. They're not viable. They're not big enough to make an impact right now, but it's on its way, and we assume that it will continue. But we're talking about immortalized stem cells that can go on forever and be put in a bioreactor and chemicals and grown into some sort of a meat-like substance. And that's the kind of thing we want the consumer to understand if they want to choose that, like they understand plant-based protein. And so, once again, it's, for me, being a cattle producer and a meat eater, I can't imagine it. But I certainly want everybody to understand what they're buying.
For me, when I first even learned about it, to my mind was the ethical problem some people might have with it, and I can understand that. I don't know what it will take from a standpoint of actually creating this and then getting it approved from some regulatory agency. But I think there's an ethical concern there, too, that doesn't always get talked about enough, in my opinion.
Could be. But mainly, I would say that there is nothing natural about the process. There's nothing that it is very highly processed. There's chemicals used. You buy a steak, there's one product in there, and it's beef. And so this is not like that at all. And so we want to make sure that is understood by consumers.
Yeah, I've seen more than one, essentially like a label with a list of what all those things are. It's not a simple little list like the word beef is,
Right.
So, yeah, I think as long as that is transparent so that people know, it's really vital that happens. So that's something that's going to be ongoing. What other things are you guys focusing on this year, and you might want to let folks know, especially if they're not able to be here and be in some of these sessions?
We are focused on disease traceability. We need to be ready for animal diseases coming in. We've got a porous border that is a huge concern for us, and so we're looking at traceability. I've had a task force working on that. That'll be a concentration this year, and that will be ongoing too, to finally get something in place so that we're prepared for anything that might come down the pike. That's a big thing. We have all the normal things of taxes and death tax and income tax and the things that never end, the waters of the U.S., and GIPSA is maybe coming down the road again. These things that we feel like we get them put to bed and then they come back. You've got the Western issues with BLM and forestry and so forth, and there's all kinds of oddball things like trying to make conservation a use of the land rather than grazing and mining and forestry and so forth. And they're kind of like little backdoor moves into getting and gaining control of the land. So there's lots of those things that are ongoing with new ones that come along.
Well, it looks like we've gotten off to a great start for CattleCon. I love that name, by the way, and it just it fits so well, and I haven't heard a single negative from anybody about that. So what do you think about calling it CattleCon and the fact that we've kind of moved some of the programming around, I think, to allow people maybe to have some better opportunities to get to some of the things that they couldn't under the way we kind of used to do it,
It's a challenge. These things you have to hold them in a place that can handle the size of our convention. We could have 7,500 people this year. which we're very, very pleased with. And so doing that in a place that can handle it and also trying to keep it affordable is a big challenge. We want to make sure the product is good. We always have a great trade show and really good educational opportunities and so forth. There's Ranchers Resilience where people can get help with paying for it. And so there's a lot of opportunities there. It's a great place to reacquaint with people. You can see customers you work with and friends and so forth. And so always in a good place. Orlando's a beautiful place and the weather's great and so forth. And I think that some of the changes in when things are happening and so forth has been effective. You've got 7,500 people you're trying to please, and so that's a challenge in and of itself.
All right, well, thank you very much, Buck, for taking the time to visit with me here. We are at CattleCon 2024. I'm Chuck Zimmerman. I have with me Colin Woodall. And first of all, Colin, this is a great name for a great event, and CattleCon. How'd that come about?
When you look at the name that we used to have, the annual Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show, that was a mouthful. And we just needed to consolidate it and really brand it as being that place where cattle producers come, one, to have fun, to make decisions for the industry, and to see all their friends. So why not CattleCon? It works, it rolls off the tongue, and we've had a lot of success in branding it that way.
Well, it's off to a great start. We've got, I don't know what numbers are like, but there's certainly a lot of people here and look like they're enjoying the Sunshine State. Thankfully, we do have sunshine. Let's kind of just jump into some of the issues of the day that are very important to NCBA that you guys are working on. I know there's quite a few, but what's kind of the most recent, I don't want to say battles you've been fighting, but whether it's EPA, just point out some of those.
As we go into 2024 here, there's a lot of things on our list. And really leading one of those, and not everybody's thinking about yet, are all the upcoming expiring tax provisions. Things like the death tax that expires at the end of 2025. If we are not successful in either getting a repeal of the death tax or an extension of these exemption levels, then it's going to go back to an exemption level of $5 million. And at $5 million, you do not have to have a very big operation to exceed that. Anything over that could be taxed at 40%. That's going to put people out of business. So we are putting back together our old band, which is not only other ag groups, but also the National Federation of Independent Business and other small businesses, to go out and let Congress know they cannot allow the exemption levels that we have right now to expire. We need to protect family farmers and ranchers, and ultimately we need to repeal the death tax.
Well, one thing that's been going on that's a huge issue, of course, is what's going on our southern border here of the United States. I don't know if I hear much said about it in relation to cattle producers, but we need farm workers, and that's an issue in and of itself. But has that had an impact, or what kind of impact has that had, especially along that southern border? Yeah,
well, that's a big issue for us, and it's a complicated issue for us because, one, there is the security issue out there, and it's a security issue for our members who actually farm and ranch on the border, because they are being inundated every day with people who are coming across their land, cutting fences, breaking water supplies, breaking into their houses, stealing their things, stealing their vehicles. That's unacceptable. People who live on the border should not have to live in fear. So we need to provide some security for them. It's also about providing us security as an industry, because anybody who's coming across the border illegally that has foot and mouth disease on the sole of their boots because they've come up out of Venezuela and other countries, that's a problem for us. So it's not just that personal security of those members who live on the border, it's the bigger security of the industry. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we do have a workforce, because we require a workforce in not only farms and ranches, but also in feedlots and packing plants to ensure that we can get that animal not only off the farm, but ultimately processed and into the grocery store. And so we need an immigrant workforce in order, a legal immigrant workforce in order to make that happen. So those are all things that we've made it very clear, not only to the administration, but also to Congress, that from us as a cattle industry, they need to act. I know that, a lot of folks that either,
have cattle or working, say, on a ranch that speaks Spanish, and I just learned about how some of the BQA programs are being translated. I thought that's kind of interesting.
Beef Quality Assurance, BQA, is one of the most popular programs that's out there. Checkoff funded, shows how the checkoff can improve our overall herd, and it has been amazing at helping producers understand the best way to work their cattle, process their cattle, handle their cattle, and we're going to continue to grow it. And one of the ways that we felt we could grow it is making sure that all of these modules are in Spanish, given the fact that so many Spanish speakers are in feedlots and packing plants and driving trucks. So we're seeing a lot of really positive feedback there, and our tagline of the right time and the right way has resonated, I believe. And also, when you think about the bigger issue of sustainability, when you ask the consumer about sustainability, they actually wonder about animal welfare. And BQA allows us to show all the great things that we're doing to protect the welfare of our animals in order to have the best product out there and ultimately satisfy their need for a high-quality product and their curiosity about how those cattle are treated.
When you use the word sustainability, it means one thing to NCBA. A lot of other people do have a different definition that really has nothing to do with really real sustainability, especially when it comes to economics, for example. But let's talk about another issue, and that is the fact that we've had a decline in the number of cattle, the herd smaller. We've got volatility, we've got uncertainty because of some of this. What's the status of that for cattle producers, and what can or is being done to help?
Overall volatility is something that plagues this industry all the time. And it is a big part of why NCBA exists, to find ways to help manage that volatility, to find ways to help producers manage that risk. And so a lot of it is the work that we do and just making sure we understand what's going on in the marketplace. So that way we can share that information. And if there's anything that's going on that is improper, to be able to have the right people look at it. But really one of the things that we're looking at is what kind of tools are available to help producers manage that risk. And one of those is LRP, Livestock Risk Protection. LRP has been a very popular program. It's offered or supported by the Risk Management Agency out of USDA. It's offered by most local insurance agents. And what it does is it gets cow-calf producers, especially smaller cow-calf producers, a tool that they can use to try to help manage this volatility, manage this risk, and hopefully make sure that they are not subject to the whims of the market that we have seen, especially here over the past 3 or 4 years. And we're going to continue to find ways to promote that product, make that product better, and ultimately ensure that a risk management tool for smaller producers in particular works.
I know there are a lot of issues that you're dealing with, some of them that aren't just brand new, like waters of the U.S., for example. That hasn't kind of like gone away, right?
Waters of the United States hasn't gone away, but we're in a much better place than we were. Matter of fact, we're smiling because we have the high ground on this. This is something we've been working on, for almost 20 years when you look back at some of the first legislation that was even introduced in this arena. But the biggest game changer for us was the 2023 decision by the Supreme Court to disallow the significant nexus test. That significant nexus test, basically saying what's close enough to be able to impact a navigable water, was going to bring in just about every body of water or potential body of water or water feature that's out there. It was going to cover the entire United States. And so by having the Supreme Court rule the way they did, that gave us a huge victory in protecting private property rights. Right now it's a matter of trying to figure out what they're going to do with seasonal or ephemeral streams, especially those that cross state lines. And we are currently involved in several legal actions to try to help finalize that. But right now we have the high ground on the WOTUS issue.
Before we close, can you just maybe talk about sort of the status of NCBA? How is the organization doing? What's your outlook? What are some of the things you're looking ahead to?
We're starting our 126 years in association. So I think that really shows the strength of our group to hold strong and to be able to go through what are a lot of times some awfully choppy waters in this industry. And the reason why is because of the strength of the membership. It's a membership that continues to grow. It's a membership that we rely on to set the direction of this association. We as staff don't lead this association. Cattle producers lead this association. Cattle producers debate the issues. Cattle producers, like they're doing here at CattleCon, are going to sit in these committees. They're going to debate, they're going to discuss, they're going to pass policy. That policy goes to the board of directors, which is also made up of cattle producers. And if they pass it, then it's going to go out in a ballot form to every member of this association. Only after that do we then take it to Capitol Hill or to the administration and try to execute it. That's the power of this association, is the member engagement and the member voice.
All right. I said before we closed, but I did have one more thought back on CattleCon itself. Besides changing the name, and we're in Orlando this year, but you kind of moved some of the programming around.
Yeah, well, we want to make sure we're always keeping it fresh. And one of the things that we have heard over time is that in a lot of cases, people have to really make some hard decisions on what they want to attend. So we've reordered things. We've kind of spread out things like Cattlemen's College over the course of the entire week rather than just in one dedicated day. And even though we're here on the front end, the feedback that we're getting is people really like the changes we've made. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have a higher attendance here at CattleCon than we did in last year's convention in New Orleans.
Well, that is fantastic, and I want to thank you, Colin, for the time here. We are at CattleCon 2024. I'm Chuck Zimmerman reporting.
Besides these CattleCon interviews, there are many more that are separated as officers, staff, trade show, and other interviews. Besides looking them up online, you can also easily get them by subscribing to the ZimmComm Golden Mike audio podcast with your favorite platform. That's the ZimmCast for now. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the ZimmCast, the official podcast of AgWired. Check us out at www.agwired.com to find out what's new in agricultural marketing.